Thank you all very much for being here. And what I'd like to start off with each of our panelists here is give them a few minutes to talk a little bit about the work that they're doing, how they're moving forward this agenda on equality, gender equality. And I will go ahead and start with Antara. If you want to go ahead and start and tell us a little bit about what you're up to, what you're doing, and how things are going in your world.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. I am an Asia Society Fellow, and I'm very proud of that. I work with the UN Girls Education Initiative. We work for girls' education. We work for gender equality, not just in education, but through education. And I want to talk about a link between girls going to school and achieving gender equality and women's empowerment. In the last 24 years, girls going to school is probably our biggest success story. It is probably our biggest achievement in the SDGs. And yet, that link between girls going to school and graduating from school and becoming women who are equal to men is not exactly that clear. It is true that when girls go to school, they're likely to have fewer children, space them apart more, likely to get married a little bit later. But it kind of ends there. The link between girls going to school and even having decision-making about going to a clinic without needing to take permission at home, not really there. So why is it that we are able to send girls to school, and yet that does not lead to gender equality? I'm going to share with you some statistics of a few countries, including from Asia. These are 4 countries, Jamaica, Jordan, Japan, and Korea. These are 4 countries where girls go to school more than boys, young women go to university more than men. So you would think that's a great indicator of equality, right? Actually, Malaysia, too, is one of those countries. There are more girls in school in Malaysia than boys. And yet, here are some statistics of these 4 countries. Jamaica, second highest rate of femicide in the world. Femicide is literally killing women and girls because they're women and girls. Mind you, significantly more girls in school than boys in Jamaica. Jordan's participation in the workforce is now 14%, so it's been going down. And only 27% of Jordanian women have bank accounts. So think about this. These are women who are graduating from school, graduating from university, and they don't have a bank account. Japan has more women than men with undergraduate degrees, and yet it has been at the bottom 10% of the global gender index. Korean women earn 65 cents to every dollar that Korean men work. So what is going on here? Here are countries that have done everything right in getting girls into school, getting young women into university, but how come it hasn't led to gender equality? Well, look at the US. The states in the US where abortion is really under threat, some of those states are also states where more women than men are in university. So clearly, just going to school and just going to university are not enough. Meanwhile, men who do not go to school or university will still have better livelihood and life options when they grow older than girls. And this goes back to what Josephine was saying. A young man's parents are more likely to get him to be an apprentice in his father's garage shop or spend their money to get him a bike so he can be a delivery guy. They're more likely to do that for him than to do that for his sister. And obviously, they're far less likely to be married as children. Even in wealthy countries that have achieved universal school completion, like in the US, we celebrate bad boy geniuses and artists who have dropped out of school and dropped out of university. I won't mention the names because they're so clear to all of us. But let me ask you this. Who are the bad girls who drop out of school and university? Do they ever get to be billionaires? Do they get to be geniuses? So I'll just summarize. We have made massive progress in getting girls into school, and we need to continue that till every child is in school. But yet, that is not the link to gender equality and women's empowerment, as we're seeing from the data. If anything, though, we do need to support girls and women's schooling, because while it is still possible for boys and men to succeed without formal schooling, it is almost impossible for girls and women too. So it is necessary, but not sufficient.
Thank you. Very interesting. I hadn't even thought of that. Have there been any studies that are kind of looking into what what it is about that? What's the next step? Like, if it's not
Indeed,
enough?
go to the UNGEI website. Yes, there's quite a bit of literature on. It comes down to how are you teaching girls and boys to be equal? What are the messages that teachers are giving to children? What are the messages they're getting in their homes and communities? And there's a lot that can be done. I was sharing this morning. People think that changing gender norms, oh, it takes generations, oh, it takes, lifetimes.
Right.
It does not. We saw massive changes in children's gender attitudes in 6 months with very little funding. So it is possible, and that is the good news.
Thank you very much, Antara. So I'm going to now take it over to, I'm going to go to Emily now, who's online. Emily, if you can give us a few minutes, tell us a little bit about your work. Go ahead.
Yes. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me today. It's amazing to be with this panel. And I think, so coming from Taiwan, I'll present Taiwan we're a bit in a conundrum. On the one hand, you'll find Taiwan as a place with really good statistics in terms of gender and equity. What I mean by that, for example, at the national parliament, we have over 40% female rate at the parliament. We have a female president right now. In the year 2000, we had our first vice president. Our next incoming vice president is also a female, also a Asia 21 fellow. So by all these metrics, I think, one would see Taiwan as being really progressive, and we are, I think, but when it comes to businesses and society's expectation on women, there's still much more to go. So, Taiwan is still very much a patriarchal society, and it's seen quite visible. Just for example, the male lineage is the idea of a male lineage is very strong. Even though women here don't have to take on husbands' surnames anymore, but for example, when you're at funerals, which is, you can tell that the sons are they are at a higher hierarchy than the daughters. When the daughters get married, they move their family, they get married off. That's very much still the Taiwanese society. And I think a part of how this comes about is that within Taiwan's political sphere, coming out of martial law at the end of the 1980s and into the 1990s, social movements was very strong, and feminist movement also spurred at that same time. So, and then that intended quotas were created for the government, for a number of women that needed to be involved in the government, and that's worked. But on businesses, we don't see that as far yet, and so on businesses, women on board is still lacking. Boys are still. Boys, if you're in family businesses, which Taiwan's a lot of small and medium-sized companies, boys as heirs are still prioritized over their sisters. And at home, women's family expectations to carry on housework, to carry on childcare, to carry on elder care is still very much heavily put upon women. And this is really a big challenge that I think not just Taiwan, but a lot of other societies are also facing, given that there is low birth rate. And in Taiwan, by 2025, it's projected that 20% of our population will be elderly. And Taiwan is not a society that encourages elderly care to nurses or homes or institutions. It's seen as not filial. So overall, there's a lot of things that Taiwan still needs to, and I think other societies like us are still battling and confronting these challenges, even though on a political stage, it looks quite good. So it's quite of a conundrum. It's quite of a interesting conundrum.
Thank you so much, Emily, for that perspective from Taiwan. Now I'll take it to Lima. You tell us a little bit about what's happening in Afghanistan and your experience there and what you're working on.
Thank you, Neelam. I would like to thank Sanjeev for inviting me here today. I just want to accept that this is my first time attending any event on 8 March. All my life, I was kind of in denial for this day because I felt we don't need a day. like the entire year should be us. We should be considered equal. But I think this time when Sanjeev asked me if I can join, I was like, Lima, you must be doing something wrong because the world is going really bitter for women day by day since I was born. So I decided to come on 8 March and talk about women and ourselves. What Antara was talking about, how education is not enough, but the country I come from, we talk about we should start from education for women, Afghanistan. So we don't have that luxury of even going to school for the last 3 years since the Taliban takeover. We don't have the luxury of talking about gender equality. We are talking about gender apartheid. I think it's not any more discrimination against women, it's more crime, what is happening in my part of the world. I don't want to sound that things are not doing bad around the world with other women from Gaza, from Sudan, from Ethiopia. There are a lot of women that are suffering, but I have a little bit more knowledge about my own country because I study that. I study population. I study population in war zones. So my current project that I'm working on, I work with child brides and widow women. So, and I want to give a little bit base of background, what is going on for the last 3 years, not talking about the last 50 years of war, but the last 3 years that Taliban has taken over from 3 different avenues. One is that Afghan women in exile, like myself, that have been, that were forced to leave the country since 2021. What are they doing? And also from international community. And what are women doing in Afghanistan right now? For almost 3 years, the women that have left the country, I think they are the most activist for what is happening in Afghanistan or with the people of Afghanistan. I think their agendas are more value-based, more human kind of centric. They are pushing for issues that what is happening with people in Afghanistan rather than thinking about what their male counterparts are doing, state-centric agendas or more power kind of negotiation. So if women are in the UN, in the international organizations, or going around the world advocating for Afghanistan, they are focusing to bring attention of the world of what is happening to the people in the country. Second of all, what the international community has been doing for the last 20 years, and also the last 3 years especially, I think human rights in Afghanistan, all over the world, but more specifically in Afghanistan, have become really monetized. So women issues are now a commodity that could be traded. Economic section are the instruments that are being used, like Afghan women issues is traded or negotiated by the Taliban with the UN, with the rest of the world. Taliban have known this now for a really long time, and it has been used very well by them as an instrument. Therefore, since their arrival, it has been more than 80 declaration and edicts that are only focused on women. I was just looking last night at some statistics. There was, I think I couldn't only find one decree that would say that women cannot breathe freely. They have banned women from everything. Antara was talking about how women would take permission from men to go to clinic. In Afghanistan, in the province that I come from, just recently, 2023, there was a declaration which says that women cannot go to a clinic, health clinic. So there are laws being made that are so inhuman that we don't even want to talk about on stage like that because they look so unreal at this age. So what the international community has been doing is that just monetizing the women rights issues, human rights issues, where Taliban are now trading. I will do this if you recognize my government. I will allow women to go to school or go to hospital if you give me this monetizing, like if you lift up these economic sections. I think what is needed is that we have to revise. We have to rethink how we are dealing with the human rights issues around the world, how to monetize them now. And what is happening in the country right now? A lot that media is not showing because media is now controlled by the Taliban. There are still women coming out on the streets. There are still women who are protesting and they are asking for their basic rights. But at the same time, I think we don't see a lot in the media that child marriages and forced marriages has been really on hike because of the food insecurity, the poverty that has been piked by the last 3 years, where the salary economy of the aid economy that was in the country, which is now not there anymore, and also half of the country is stopped from working. So when half of the country is not working, there will be an economic collapse. That is what is going on, and especially where my research area comes, I work with widows, like with single woman-headed household, where all these women are banned from working. So if you don't have a man in your house, what is the life situation? Of course, you are forced to sell your children. And who has a market? Women children has a market. So girls' children from 20 years old until 12 years old are right now, like the big market in Afghanistan is that young girls are being sold for $2,000. And that's what is happening in the country. But I'm doing right now a PhD, so I do speak to some young people there through life history. And one of my participants is a girl in a really rural area of Afghanistan. Yesterday I was talking to her. Of course, I was talking about her childhood. So I found her a really hopeful person. But then I asked her one question, like whenever there was any suicide bomb attack or anything where it was difficult time, how were you surviving? And she was saying, I think I'm a really hopeful person. Whenever there was a tough time, I would just hope what I would be in the future. And she said, Lima, I always believed that I will be president of the country. And she said, I still believe I could be the president of a country. So inside the country, there is still hope. I hope we could do something to help them with their hopes to come true.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that overview. We're going to come back to you for a little bit more on some of the topics that you touched upon. But I want to go back to Antara now and ask you a little bit about what's going on. Yourself, you are the director of the UN Girls Education Initiative. And so what can you tell us about the progress we have made in girls' education and what it means for gender equality for women and men?
I feel like I stole that.
Yeah, you did.
My opening remarks. But I do want to share some of the very positive things that are going on. First of all, I think that there is talking about gender equality is powerful, is sexy. Like governments do it, ministries do it. The UN does it. You know, we all talk about it. It does help. It's not just language on a stage. It helps the feminists in the organizations. It helps the committed people in the organization to then hold those organizations accountable. Well, you said this, Minister of Finance. You said this, Minister of Education. Okay, well then can we allocate this money to do X, Y, Z, to have after-school tuitions for children who really need it, which often happens to be marginalized boys and girls. So the attention on gender equality does have to continue. I think we have to go back also to the definition of education. What is education? It's not just about learning how to read and write. I mean, if you go back to your family histories, wherever you are from, and we have such a diverse audience today, you will remember grandparents telling you, great aunts and uncles telling you lessons about being a good person. It's in our religious mythology. It's in all of these lessons that are there in our culture about being a good person, about living in peace with your neighbor, a lesson that this world really needs right now. So education is not just about learning how to read and write and then going and getting a job and somehow finding a way to live in a city and have an apartment and send your kids to school. It's about how we interact with each other as people. Now, gender equality is what is the disruptor in that, because those stories for many of us were not gender equal. They were very patriarchal, and they were very much about prescribed a very narrow role for women. But this is where teaching gender equality comes in, because if you teach children to ask questions about why things happen the way they do, they are not going to be able to unsee it. I was sharing a story earlier today. We did this program with rural first-time schoolgoers in Haryana, a state in India, which has a lot of patriarchal history. We told these children, keep a diary for 2 weeks, and they're semi-literate kids of farmers going to school for the first time. These are not wealthy children. So they are semi-literate. We did these little tables for them. We had pictures of ironing clothes, cooking, watching TV, drinking tea at the chai store with their friends, taking care of children, working, all of that. We said, keep a diary for 2 weeks. How much time your father does all of these things, how much time your mother does all of these things. And these kids went away and kept these diaries, and they came back 2 weeks later, and the boys were furious. The girls were also, they also found that their mothers were obviously doing a lot more work and still waking up at 5 a.m, whereas the father's watching TV at night, not putting away the dishes in the kitchen, not bathing the children, not ironing the school uniforms. The mother's doing all of that, and yet she's still waking up at 5 a.m. But the boys were really angry about it, because guess what? They love their mothers and they love their fathers. Once they see this, the impact of seeing that lasts. 5 years later, when we follow up with these children, their attitudes are still more gender egalitarian. So when you teach children almost to remember who they are, their humanity, it does have an impact. No child was born wanting to hurt someone else. There is no child in the world who crawls to another child to hit them. We are teaching them this. We are teaching a very toxic masculinity to boys, and they're growing up to be leaders who believe that the only way they can be happy is by amassing territory and power. But education and gender equality, if it comes together, we really, really believe it can lead to a different world.
I really like that story you did share in the green room about the boys and keeping the diaries, and I think that's such an interesting thing for even us to try at home. And see what it is that our boys are, have them track who's doing what, A lot of modern families, both parents are working, but you oftentimes see the mother doing even more than the dad, even though they're both working. And so that's another lesson, I think, for our young people. Thank you. I'm going to go to Emily. And Emily, according to Taiwan's Department of Gender Equality 2024 Gender Image, Gender Equality Report published at the end of January of this year, it has topped Asia in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development's, OECD, Social Institutions Gender Index, SIGI. Can you speak to some of the policies and incentives that have facilitated empowerment of women in Taiwan?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's really something that I think coming from Taiwan, we're very lucky of some of the policies and the support that's come for women. Growing up, we really took this for granted. And anything from, for example, growing up in elementary schools, we have class presidents and class presidents, and there was always a lot of girls who participated. And it was because these positions at the time all went to the best student. And so it was obvious that girls would take leadership in that position. And I say this as a way to say that for women to be in politics in the last 4 decades that we've had democracy, it's never a question of whether women can or cannot be in politics. So I think for Taiwan, we're really lucky to not have to debate that. And later we will learn that what happened was that during our democratization process, a lot of women who were activists were all in the same group of activism who advocated for not just freedom, democracy out of martial law, but also all the social movements. Women were always at the forefront of activism. So when legislations came in the 90s, first in 1991, there was a quota that was created for women's participation rate for elected office. And you cannot you cannot legislate how many women are in the office, but they did it by legislating how much percentage of women you're putting onto the ballot. And later on, this extended to the lower representatives, to city councilors as well. And eventually, that's how we got to 40% women's in national parliament. And today, that translates into also some of the top cabinet members are also women. So right now, the ministries of finance, the Ministry of Economic Affairs, the Ministry of Labor are all women. The Ministry of Digital Affairs is a transgender woman. Heads of some very important commissions are also by women. And so it's become very, it's not, how do I say, it's not, there's never a question that women can or cannot take office. However, what we have heard from women politicians is that they still have to battle some of the patriarchal expectations of what women should be and how girls should be, despite the fact that they are in office, despite the fact that they are in parliament. The expectation of them, of their role at home remains the same. Or when you are a young woman who want to enter politics, there's a particular role. You have to be really cute. You have to drop your voice. You have to up your pitch, at particular settings. And it's very mind-boggling. How do you have both ways? But somehow it does. So in total, I think in politics, the quota system has really, really helped. But also, it's the high number of activists, women activism that's sprung out at the same time as Taiwan was transitioning into democracy. So I think these two things kind of go hand in hand.
Thank you, Emily. It reminds me of what Antara was saying, that education is not enough. There needs to be something more. Being in parliament apparently is not enough. Having women there, there's something beyond that needs to happen to really make some movement in gender equality. Thank you. And my question to you, Lima. So you gave us a very good overview of what is happening with the current state of Afghanistan. We really do appreciate that. Can you talk a little bit about what steps can be taken to helping to restore some of what happened, the progress that has been made over the last 20 years? What steps can be taken to kind of, go back there and to continue the progress? Do you see any hope in this area? What are your thoughts about the future?
I think my hopes are, all of us should have hopes, because I think what is happening in Afghanistan is kind of unimaginable, and we don't know where it will go if the international community or all of us allow it to continue like that. So as Antara and Emily both said, education, not enough. Right now in Afghanistan, if even boys are going to school, is not enough. What they are taught, that's more important. Right. Because the curriculum is changed. It's changed to a really radicalized curriculum, what the boys are learning, right? And the girls are not learning, they are pushed to home. So I don't think so. This is something we want to imagine a country, what will become to its population. The country is so young that more than 75% of the population is under the age of 20. So what will happen to this population if we let it be that way? In my opinion, what can be done is that we should not repeat what we were doing in the last 20 years, where the leadership of what should be happening in Afghanistan was in the hand of international community. I think now the leadership of what should be happening in Afghanistan, we should listen to Afghans. We should listen to Afghans and give platforms to women in Afghanistan themselves, what is happening. Me even sitting here, not being able to connect for the last 3 years physically in Afghanistan, I don't see myself representing Afghan women of right now, because I think our situation, and also this idea of unifying an issue. For the last 20 years, what we saw, we unified this Afghan women issue as a one category. Afghan women is this one thing which we need to address. But there are different groups, different needs of Afghan women their political views, their economic views, everything is different. So we have to give platform to Afghans themselves. And the international community should not say that, oh, they don't need help, so they have to do it. No, we do need support, but the leadership has to be in the hand of Afghans. We have to work in partnership with local NGOs in Afghanistan, with local programs in Afghanistan, where they would tell us what we should be doing in Afghanistan. And this de facto government, which is there, I don't know how sustainable it will be for Afghanistan, for the region, and I think for the world itself. I think for the last 20 years, the region was really not taking part in what was happening in Afghanistan. I think it was more the West involved, and the region, the Asia itself took back seat. I think the region has to come, the leadership of region has to come and see, do we want a country among our own continent where radicalization is being produced in a mass level. So I think it's a regional issue that we have to, it's not a women issue, it's a country issue, it's an entire demography issue that we have to be thinking about.
Thank you very much. We want to give the audience a little time to ask questions. I hope that's all right with you. And thank you all very much for all of your perspectives, and I know it's probably sparked some questions from the audience. So if you do have a question, please raise your hand, and we will bring the mic to you. There's a question over here.
I have two questions, actually. The first is the role of social media in having some ability to leverage the goals that you have, because these are young people, and I guess there must be some restrictions on the Afghanistan side, but as it pertains to the other countries, how much are you able to sort of influence views and morals and education broadly through social media? And then the second one is, you're working at sort of the policy. You're working at the policy level. You know, all these people in the room, because we care about the issue and would love to have impact on a sort of boots on the ground way. I mean, would love to hear about initiatives that you have that include just general people in the world who want to support the efforts.
Do you want to go first, Lima?
Social media question, yeah, either.
Yes.
Either.
Yeah, I would go with, I think the social media play a really powerful role. I think we saw the first period of Taliban in Afghanistan, the first regime. I don't think so many people know what happened in the country. This time, I think the world knows because of the social media. And the young people in Afghanistan who were born after the first time regime of Afghanistan, they didn't know how the Taliban of the before their time was. So at the beginning, at least until now, they are not even realizing how the world will function this way. Because everybody, I think, in Afghanistan who has access to phone or internet, they are becoming YouTubers. They are doing something. They are showing part of Afghanistan that is happening. Either if it's cooking, either if it's anything that they could show, because few of the people that I talked to for my research, they would tell me that, Lima, it seems like we are on quarantine, when this quarantine will end. So for them, it's still not hitting that this is forever kind of issue, that the women will be locked at home and boys and girls cannot go to cafe for coffee or they cannot socialize together. They have really not kind of found this way that this is forever because of the social media. They're connected what is happening around the world, what the young people around the world are doing. There are still TikTok videos being made in Afghanistan. Of course, some of them are being arrested and tortured, who Taliban find it scary for them, but still it's not stopped. So I believe social media really can play a role, but also at the same time, just as personal story, we in Paris with a group that I'm working with, Art Lots, we had a art activity kind of conference for artists in exile just a month ago. So of course social media was there. We were talking about Afghan artists. We were saying like what is happening, and everybody was posting. But it could be coincident. It could not be. Just after our conference, after a week, a few of the artists were arrested by the Taliban in Afghanistan. So social media can really play a bad role also, because Taliban now knows what people are doing. So of course we presented the work of young artists being done in the country, but overseas we see still things are happening, but some of the artists were kind of arrested. So we said like we have to take it slow. Social media is a powerful tool, but we still don't know how. We don't have a control over the country where it's in the hand of almost, terrorist groups. So, yeah.
Antara or Emily want to address that social media question?
Emily, do you want to come in?
Yeah, sure. I think for social media, Taiwan uses social media a lot, very heavy. We are mostly on Facebook, Instagram, some TikTok. TikTok is getting a lot more influential. And as social media it is, you're going to have very problematic conversations sometimes, but then also a lot of people who are countering that. So what we've seen is that there's been groups, educational groups or civic society, NGO groups that have created these really excellent social media accounts that are reporting on whichever issues. And there's one particular account that's very heavy on kind of gender, feminism, and also things that happen within the campus, which is really important when it comes to the education of, this is mostly junior high and high school and colleges. And so they take some of their reportings on some of the problematic things. And I say that, some of the problematic things, because recently we have seen some very irresponsible, I think, language, misogynist language coming out of college boys, young men. But the pushback is also really strong in creating a really healthy public discussion that needs to happen. So I think for Taiwan, it's hopeful in terms of how social media is used in that sense, in creating that public discussion.
Okay, thank you. And how about quickly addressing what are you doing on the ground, and how can people who are interested in this get
Sure.
involved?
So if you think about it, educating for gender equality is something that we can all do, including for ourselves and definitely in our families and in our communities. UNGEI will be launching a campaign called Real Brave Change. It'll be on our website. It's UNGEI, and we will be welcoming everybody to upload videos and stories of how you have countered gender stereotypes in your life. I know in India, a big pet peeve for me is, you have all these people talking about gender equality, and then you ask them, in your family, has there been dowry? And yes, in every family, there has been dowry. So if you don't stand up to that in your own family, then I'm sorry, you don't get to talk about it. So there is a lot of that we can do. I did want to say one thing on social media. Social media has been really important in elevating young feminist leadership from around the world. Social media has really led to a kind of equality where young people are speaking up. They're a lot more confident and they're a lot smarter than I was when I was their age. And that's been a really positive change. The misogyny that Emily is talking about is also very real. I don't know if you guys followed Andrew Tate, that terrible, terrible man. But I've been hearing stories from friends in rural Canada where 10-year-old boys are, think of him as a god and, follow all of the things that he's saying. So there's something missing here. There's something really missing on supporting boys to ask questions and have healthy, respectful views as well.
Thank you. We have time, I think, for a couple more questions. And please limit to one question. I think Anu has a question here. And then we have a couple in the back.
So firstly, thank you. This is such a beautiful way to start Women's Day today. I have a question for you, Antara. I teach children, and especially elementary school age group, about cultural literacy, so anything dealing with South Asia. So my question is, are there any resources available that we could utilize, whether it's schools or parents, to teach about gender equality, whether it's resources in terms of books or, journaling definitely is an amazing thing and a very good idea, but anything else?
Sadly, there isn't a universal resource I could point you to. This is something that UNGEI is looking into. We're having conversations with, the scholastics of the world and so on. there's Common Sense Media, which in the US, it's this platform where parents can just, so many of you are nodding, parents can just go on it, type in the name of a movie, and it'll give you a sense of, okay, is this appropriate to show? We actually don't have something like that on gender. And yet, the evidence is still really sad. 80% of animals in children's picture books are male. And when they're female, it's a mother, mother duck, mother goose. So I wish I could say there is a resource. There isn't. There are some fabulous publishers. We were talking about Bluey this morning. There's great content out there, but so far we haven't found a curation of it, but we're working on it.
A question in the back, or two in the back there.
Thank you, everyone. My question is for Lima. Two questions, but very small. One, why Afghan women carry so much hope in their heart despite the stones that are thrown at them, despite the pain that they carry within themselves? Why are they so hopeful? And other question is that if you could define women of Afghanistan in 3 words, what would they be?
Well, why they are hopeful? I don't know. I mean, a lot of us, we were not allowed to go to school, but still we want. I think when you don't have anything and you're alive and you're a human, I would say Afghan women are human beings. That's why they are hopeful. There is nothing different. My job as a writer for the rest of my life would be how to normalize Afghan women as a normal human being. So I think they are human beings. That's why they are hopeful. How do I want to define Afghan women? I think I want to say normal, because I think Afghan women, just this term is being so politicized for such a long time that whenever we are in any sitting, we are not asked like, Lima, what do you think? They always say, Lima is an Afghan woman, what do you think? Like there is this extra burden of you being different or victimized or not being able to enjoy the same way of life that every human being is doing. So for me, it is like, if we have gone through different experiences, it does not make us different human beings where we will be put in a different box where we will not deserve the same kind of life that every human being should be entitled to. So I don't have 3 words for it, but I would just say Afghan woman is a normal, powerful human beings.
I think we have another question back here.
Thank you so much. This is very, very empowering, by the way. My question is that this has already been touched upon, but I'm just wondering if there is any specific answers to this, but what are the approaches that engaging men and boys can take today to really fight the gender inequality?
Anybody want to start?
I can start.
Okay.
This is not necessarily the most hopeful response, but there was a video on Twitter of a young man who was in medical school, and he just did this protest, and he led a whole bunch of young men out of that school protesting a month after they announced that women can no longer go to university. That video just made me bawl. Like, it was amazing to see these young men do that, but then I did read that he was arrested and put in jail, so that's why it's not a terribly hopeful story. There's great work being done in the US. There's great work being done with Black boys, African American boys, helping them sort of reclaim their humanity against all the really negative socialization they experience, both in being Black and in being boys. There's an organization in Uganda called Raising Voices that does amazing work in teaching boys consent. So I think that word consent and really understanding and elevating that word is really critical. It's really important for boys to understand that they don't have a right over other people's bodies and lives and decisions. And it's really important for girls to understand that they have the right to give and not give consent, regardless of what that means in terms of successful femininity. So there are great examples. I mean, you can just Google and you'll find a lot of it, but we do have some examples also on our website.
I will just add into that we live in such an interesting world. Just a couple of months ago, some of our colleagues received some awards here in New York City by some of the few men, like 3 or 4 of them, got awards that they were women allies. And I was like, why would you should be getting an award for that? This is a normal thing to do. It's something you should be doing as a human being. Why you should be celebrated? Oh, you are a good person because you believe on women equality. So these kind of initiatives should be happening. I still am there for, but I think it starts from what Antara was saying, that from childhood, our sons and brothers and everybody has to be taught the same values that are taught to women. And there shouldn't be anything where we feel, I think our socializing and upbringing is the main thing, which unfortunately we don't focus on that. But then when we marry a really progressive man, later on we fight with them, why you don't change diaper? Because they had never seen that, their mom doing it or their sister doing or grandma doing it. So these are the stuff that we can do from childhood, and we should incorporate it into our education system. Because the programs that we are talking about, donor-based programs, they could be impactful, but they are not sustainable and not long run. So we have to be thinking about the fundamental of changing our societies and our view of life.
I think over here, what we've seen work really is to have men who are really good allies in helping to communicate to the rest of the society that men should also take part in the redistribution of whether it's housework or just redistribution of the discussions on welfare and home and childcare. In our last legislature, there was a particular male legislator member of the parliament who was very active about that, to show everybody that he's a young father, that he participates in fatherhood, that why should public bathrooms with that are meant for toddlers, why are they women only? Because in his scenario, he said, I would also like to take my daughter to the bathroom. Why am I not open to that? To have men that say, it is okay for me to take on parental leave. So for Taiwan, it's been really important to have men who are those allies and to help communicate that to the rest of the society. It's going to take a little bit of time. For Taiwan, in the last 8 years, we've had a female president, and I've gotten asked multiple times, what has this particular female president done to further women's rights? But the thing is, we don't ask that question of male presidents. And so I think it's at all levels. It's the redistribution of the welfare discussions that we've seen work. And I think a lot of work needs to still be done, but that's one thing that we see engage males. Another one is for women who are in leadership positions to call out, to point attention on some of the things that could be done better. There's a very high level forum in Taiwan, a 2-day forum. It is with the world's most top experts that also fly in for this policy forum. And for the past 2 years now, it's mostly been manuals for man panels. And finally, this year, there was a woman who was a moderator who just said on stage, we've seen what's happening in the past 2 days, and we hope this could be better. And it took somebody who is in her position, who also has the respect of her colleagues, to really call out that situation. So really, on the people who are in the leadership position to help push along that.
Thank you. Just an example here at Asia Society, this panel was put together by our male colleague, Sanjeev Sirchan. So there's definitely, we do have an ally here at Asia Society to bring up these topics, and he was a big proponent of doing a program for Women's International Day. So thank you very much.
Neelam, can I
Yes.
add one thing? Let's also remember that gender equality is really good for boys and for men. They're not just doing it for women. They're not just doing it for their wives or their sisters. Doing it for themselves. Masculinity, the way it is, it's not a fun place to be. It's very narrow. It doesn't allow you to be the many different things you can be. There's so much focus on livelihood and in bringing in income and being strong, and it looks horrible from my personal perspective. So it's gender equality is for boys. It's for men. It's not just for girls and women.
Absolutely. So on that note, we're going to thank our panelists for being here. Thanks, Emily, for joining us online. It's a pleasure to have you, and we hope next year we can do something else and do even more throughout the year, because it doesn't have to be just one day. We agree with that. So thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
and thank you all for coming this morning.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks.